All right, welcome to the August 4th, 2020 Club Cubase Google Hangout. We'll get started here in just a couple minutes. So I'm going to do a quick audio test and make sure everything is going through okay. Let me just refresh my browser on one computer. All right, sounds like that's coming through fine. So my name is Greg Undo. I'll be the host for the Hangout today. We will, if you haven't attended a Hangout before, let me just okay. I have a couple computers are set to monitor audio. So my name is Greg Undo. I'm presenting from United States in Alexandria, Virginia. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America as a Steinberg product specialist. And I'll be hosting today. So if you haven't attended a Hangout before, how it basically works is you can send questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de, or you could enter them in the chat field, and we'll try to go through them chronologically. We're going to let people who are watching live get logged in. If you're watching this after the live stream, you may want to skip ahead to 8 or 10 minutes, and we can get started then. But for the people that are watching live, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. And we see a bunch of questions coming in already. That's helpful. And how this works is you could just kind of enter your questions in the chat field. And we'll try to get through as many as completely, as succinctly as possible. We'll try to go for about 4 hours, a little bit under 4 hours today. So we'll, try to go through a lot of topics. We will try to have the index done. It may be tomorrow morning. I have some family stuff to do later tonight. So an index will have kind of all the topics and timestamps that were discussed in the Hangout today. Like many of you, I have my family at home, so I may be interrupted by my son to put on a new show, and you may hear my wife who's working directly above me. I'll apologize in advance for that. If when asking a question, if we could try to, sometimes people will ask the same questions repeatedly over and over again in the chat field. If we could try to avoid that, that just kind of slows everything down. We'll try to get to as many questions. The chat will often be well ahead of as we're going through questions. So we'll try to catch up, and we'll try to get through the questions that people had sent in advance as well. And as you're asking questions, sometimes different questions or different versions could be contingent upon certain features. So if you could maybe say, I have Cubase Pro 10.5 or I have Cubase AI 8 in a question, that could often help and kind of stop some speculation on other people's ends. But let's take a quick look, see who is online here. So we see Ace from Texas. I know I got an earlier question from Ed that probably may have cycled off, but I think I have it captured. Okay, so we have Marvin checking in from Rhode Island. Okay, so we have Jason from York, UK. Okay, so we have some question on harmony voices as well as some generic remote. All right. Okay, so a question on Very Audio. Same question is someone's learned a lot from the Hangouts from Bologna, Italy. I went through there on a train once. Didn't get to stop. All right, so we have Polska. All right, so we have Jazz Dude from Germany. I believe he's in Heidelberg. We have Agent K. I see Millard Brown's welcome from sunny, not Pennsylvania. We had that storm earlier this morning, so it'll go through pretty quick for you, Millard. So we have Pablo, we have Jason Sykes. And Jason, I have my, I know you sent me an email, but I know I have my iPad with IC Pro kind of connected, ready to go as well. So, so I have that set up, and if you could just ask the question. So I know we had a couple of IC Pro questions, so I got that all configured now. All right, so we have Oregon, London. Okay, so we have Matt from Fort Wayne. We have Ted Springman. I see Ted Springman. Congratulations, Greg. By my count, you've answered 6,608 Cubase questions throughout the Google Hangouts and other tutorials. The student body petitions Hamburg U for your honorary doctorate. That's nice. You should write, you should send a figure over to Steinberg. So it's always nice to get some kudos and some little bragging rights. But that's great. Thank you, Ted, for sharing. All right, so Taylor from Pine Grove. All right, so London, Iran, Kenosha. Good to see John. I know you've been on a lot of the Hangouts. Question, what is the grace period for upgrading spectral layers? I purchased Spectral Layer 6 less than 2 months ago. I think it's usually a 30-day window from activation of the license. So I think it would be 30 days from yesterday. All right, so we have India checking in. All right. All right, so we have Luke from Jalisco, Mexico. We have Sweden, India again. Okay, let's just go through. All right, so lots of attendees here. All right, so we have Argentina. Okay, so we have some questions on Ambisonics. You see Ted Springman got his Spectral Layer 7 announcements. Okay, so I see Ed. So I figured, Ed, you were here, but your question may have gone off on the discussion, but I kind of have it captured. So we have Calgary, South Wales. We have Hans from the Netherlands. Beautiful country. Okay, so we have Jaron from Portsmouth, Virginia. Good to see a fellow Virginian. Okay. So lots of great questions. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. All right. So let me just switch views on. I always have a couple of laptops going here to make everything. All right, so Ed, hi, thanks for these. They are helpful. Can you make a logical editor preset that will map every F note to every F sharp and so on? So you could map one set of notes to another across all octaves. So I created a lovely, we'll call it a 21st century composition of a bunch of notes that are just F in different octaves, going from F0 through F8. So this will, let me just zoom this so we can see all of our pitches here. And what we want to do is to, if we, a lot of times when we work with the logical editor, we may say, take every F1 and, increase the pitch by one semitone. But that would take F1 to F sharp 1, but not F2 to F sharp 2. So if we wanted to do that, we could go to the logical editor. And I think I have the preset up. What we want to do is set the type. We're going to choose on the function transform. And we're going to say type is equal to note. Then when we come here, we can say the pitch. And we'll say the value 1 pitch. And we're going to say is note is equal to. And then we'll just say F per your example. And then, so I'll just say F. And then what we want to do in the action target is to take the value 1 of the pitch and add 1. So I will kind of take this and we'll zoom, close my logical editor, and we'll zoom in so you could see this a little better. So we have F6, F5, F5, F6, F7, F8. So now when we go to this logical editor preset, instead of defining a very specific F1, F2, F3, we're just going to say note is equal to F. And as we do this, they'll now just all be applied and be able to transpose accordingly, just like so. So again, note is equal. We're going to say type is equal to note. Pitch is, and we're going to say note is equal to F. And that's where we define the note within scale, but not necessarily which octave. And then choose to increase or decrease accordingly. Okay, so it's... Let me just get my timeline back on my other computer. Okay, so it says, hi, Greg. Hope you and your family are doing well. We are. Thank you for asking. How do I slice a range inside several tracks all at the same time without having to use the knife tool to cut on each single track individually? So let's come over here. I think I have a project that's kind of set up. So you could do this using folder tracks quite effectively. So if you wanted to go to folder tracks, so I have all of my drum tracks, let's say, in a folder, and then you could choose to grab the scissors tool and cut the folder, and that will cut everything within the folder like so. And if you wanted to do it on individual parts, we could take the folder, and you may have to kind of just make it a little taller, but you have this function for group editing. And then anytime that you would cut on any single track, all the different edits and cuts would be applied within the folder just like so. So put it into a folder track. You could split the folder track using the scissors tool, or put group editing, enable that, and then be able to cut accordingly on individual parts within the folder. Okay, just wanted to ask if there was a way to group edit, say, volume automation in Cubase 10. So I think I have some automation in my other project. Let me jump back. So what a lot of people do is just kind of copy paste automation. So let's say if I'm here, I'll just... Let me just draw in some quick automation here on these events. Bear with me just a second. All right, so we'll go to our mix console, activate the project, that would help. Okay, so one method that you could do is just simply coming over here. So let's say you have automation here and there that I think if we, and let me just do this for a couple tracks and see if we could paste multiply. So let's say if I select this range of automation and copy, and let's see if it'll paste across. So you can do one at a time to paste. The automation like that. So it's not necessarily tied to it to say, okay, so now we have kind of the same automation that's been applied to multiple ones. And what a lot of people also do is, you know, if we just want to write automation for all of the events. So let's say if we have our mix console active here in the project. So let's say I will take these different audio events. So let's say we just disable reading of the automation here. So, and what you could do is just kind of select these and link them together. So if we have it, I'll just activate a Q link. So if I wanted to do the automation there, I could keep those linked. And if I wanted the same value for each of them, I could just put it into absolute mode. And then as soon as I release and go back to suspend, you know, you could at that point, you know, just have, if you wanted to write to multiple tracks simultaneously, and as we just wanted to come here, we'll activate. And as we rewind, you could just, I'll write automation again here. So let's say we'll link these channels together. And if they're just a quick link, we could come here, we could write the proportional automation, take it to absolute, write all the same values. And then at that point, you could have the automation kind of be the same. So if you just wanted to move one fader, so there's the proportionality, and then if you wanted to jump back to have it all be the same. So that's a way you could enter in like the same automation for multiple tracks quickly, just kind of rewriting some of the automation. Okay, it says I want to create harmony voices, but I could not select it in the audio menu. Do I have to do something first? Could be sometimes selections could be based upon what is selected. So if I wanted to come here, I'll activate this project. And I go to my audio menu and we'll see that generate voices is probably, or generate harmonies is going to be probably disabled. And then when I select a part, I go to my audio menu, then, so let me just find it here real quick. That was in the audio. Okay, so generate harmony voices here. When nothing is selected, it's going to be bypassed. So at this point, all you have to do is make sure that you have an audio file selected, not a MIDI file, and then that should become visible and active for you. Okay, follow up on my question from last Hangout about using generic remote to open an insert on the master bus. After adding a track to the project, the remote mapping gets skewed. Can I avoid this? So let's go ahead and give it a try. So I think the last time we set up a generic remote to activate, I think I put like maybe just a Magneto plugin on. So we'll come over here to distortion. So say I have Magneto on my master bus here. And let's go to my generic remote. So I will come over here to generic remote, and I want to say this note on message, and I'll just click on learn, and I'm going to capture a note on message. Okay, and I want this to go to mixer, and then we want it to be our stereo out, and let's go to insert 7, which will be Magneto, and we will choose to edit Magneto. So now when I hit this particular MIDI key, just the Magneto plugin becomes visible. Now you mentioned when you add a track that it gets skewed, so let's go ahead and add a number of audio tracks here. And now when I do that, let's see if any of those tracks are selected. Okay, so it doesn't seem, let me just check here. Okay, so it looks like you may, after adding tracks, just kind of reset the track there. So if you just kind of set the channel, you may have to redefine that, and now you could just simply do that. I'll mention that to the developers. It's kind of I would think that would stick in the studio setup to the specific one, as opposed to being tied to the order of the tracks. But I understand what's happening. But you may just have to kind of redefine that once after your tracks are set, and then that could just simply work as expected. Okay, so hi everybody. Hi Greg. Nice to finally join tonight. Still trying to figure out if it's possible to hear the notes you edit in Very Audio while moving them, like in Melodyne. So yeah, you could definitely do that. You want to make sure that you have the control room active. So when I want to, because this will go through the listen bus. And if you don't have the control room active, you probably want to go to the outputs here and define a stereo output, but not have it routed anywhere. And go to your control room and have monitors. And this is, add a monitor. And at this point, you could choose to, have your audio connections defined there. So if you have that already, and we're now in the Very Audio editor. So I'll just pop right over here. We'll have our Very Audio. There's a little function that sometimes gets turned off called Acoustic Feedback. So now if I come and adjust the pitch, I don't hear it, but we see this little speaker icon. Just simply activate that. So at that point, you can just, hear. And if you wanted to, use the left and right arrows to navigate. So just make sure that you have the acoustic feedback and that the audio is set up in the control room, and then you should be able to hear all the changes that you make in Very Audio. Okay. Question. Hi, Greg. Does Steinberg have any Hans Zimmer libraries like the German Yuhi Zebra tours, similar strings, ambient sounds for cinematic scores? I always prefer to purchase native Steinberg products. Thanks. We don't have any Hans Zimmer branded content. We're just happy that, he's a, very loyal and, very much a power user for us. But we haven't really pursued any, content with him for Steinberg stuff. So there isn't any currently. Okay, so all right, so it says I'm having audio processing load peaks and audio dropouts while CPU RAM is around 53%, buffer size, etc. tweaked. Can this be caused by my USB 2 interface? Could a USB 3.0 interface help? It's probably not going to be, the USB 3 can have a lot of, could have additional bandwidth, but a lot of times, the audio that you're actually using may not be exceeding your USB 2.0 bandwidth. And it's probably going to be related to, I would check, if it's 53% and you adjust the buffer size, so, when you say buffer size tweaked, I assume that you've raised the buffer size. So that would be like the first thing I would do when you're kind of having your CPU RAM and you're having dropouts, is to do that. And if you have plugins that are going on, one thing you could do quickly to see if it makes a difference is to, it could be that you have plugins on, like a lot of people will have a full mastering chain on their master bus. And what you want to try to do, if you're doing, unless you're at the kind of the very final stages, I would try to deactivate those like while tracking, but you could try to click in the lower left-hand corner of the transport. And there's this little thing called constrained delay compensation. So if it's plugins are causing that load, you could click this button, and if then your CPU load, becomes much more manageable, then it's going to be kind of plugins that are taxing your system. So I'm not sure if a USB 3 interface would help. It may give you the ability for more bandwidth for recording, capturing, and outputting channels, but and it really could also depend upon the driver of the audio interface as well. It can make a big difference. All right, good to see Jan from Stockholm on a Hangout. He's a big fan. Sent me a nice note saying how much he likes the Hangouts. Excuse me. All right, so people checking in from Oregon. Hi, Greg. Is there a way to import tempo from XML format, or can the BPM unit be changed, quarter, eighth, quarter dotted, note beats per minute? Currently, it's kind of, Cubase is set to a tempo value of quarter notes, so there isn't a real way of doing like a dotted quarter note tempo value. And I don't think that is actually going to be passed. I think that the Music XML would take the tempo over in the file, but that's just, I'm not sure if the tempo is going to be based upon anything in the standard MIDI or XML file other than quarter note. So, okay, so let's move on. All right, so we have Croatia checking in. Okay, so we have a question. What does ambisonics convert do? How is it used? So if you want to work with kind of audio that can, basically ambisonics is a format that allows you to kind of to take audio not only from the left to right channels, but to have the audio be able to be positioned to go like in a hemisphere. So it can have some heights as well as being able to, kind of spin around your head. So you could have it, the sound appear to be backwards for you. So it's kind of a 360 dimensional sphere when you do that. Now, a lot of times you may have to actually record an audio file with microphones that are set up for that. And when we go to add a track, we could just, instead of it being, our audio outputs of stereo at this point, you could add, different configurations. So at this point, you could have first order, second or third order ambisonic. So you may notice like a lot of recorders, like the little portable Zoom recorders, and also Rode have microphones where you have 4 different capsules in the microphone, and that's able to kind of capture the ambisonics information. And then this way, as soon as we have like a, first or second order ambisonics, and I'll just kind of show you what Panner looks like here really quick. So, it's not something that often you would take just a regular audio file and then be able to, work so easily within ambisonic. So often capturing it is a big component of it. So just open up this project, and this could also kind of tie directly in if you have an HMD, like goggles that you wear for virtual reality. You could come over here and have the goggles. And so now, as we wanted to, be able to take the audio and pan it around, kind of, so this is the top view, and then you could have kind of the rear view of the panner, and you could pan the different audio sources in kind of a spherical, environment, as opposed to just left, right stereo. Okay, so what is the grace period for upgrading Spectral Layer 7? I purchased Spectral Layer 6 less than 2 months ago, so I think we mentioned this a bit earlier, but, so generally it's 30 days is kind of the grace period. So you may have missed it by about a month. Sorry about that. Okay, so discuss a bit about ambisonics. Okay, so we have a question. Hi, I'm recording a church service on 2 equipment, Zoom H6 and Airworth. After importing the audio to Cubase, they appear at different speeds. The audio line does not fix the problem. So what I would do is I take a look at the audio files, and you'll probably notice this sounds like kind of a classic sample rate, where maybe one is recording in 48K and one is recorded at 44.1. So you could, if you look at the audio files in the pool, open up the pool, and you may have to just kind of click here on the audio folder and just check the sample rate between the 2 files. And I bet that there's going to be a sample rate discrepancy between the 2 recorders, where one is going to be, 88.2 or 96K, or 44.1, 48K. So, question, any word from Michael on upcoming Spectral Layers Hangouts to add detail to the new version 7 promo videos? Spectral Layers Pro 7 is an early Christmas present for sure. Hope Cubase 11 arrives in time for Christmas. I was speaking with Michael over the weekend, Mike Steinberg, who has done some of the Spectral Layers Hangouts. So I asked, I think he's planning on trying to get another Hangout going now that version 7 is out. So I'll see if I can get a definitive answer, and maybe have an answer for Friday's Hangout. I'll try again to see if there's going to be a particular date that's planned. Okay, so question from Pinder. Hi, Greg. Is there any way to save your templates if I have to reinstall Cubase? I think prefs are corrupt. I've had graphical glitches since I installed and updated to 10.5. Thanks. What I would do is, your templates, as soon as you actually, let's say if I built a template here, so I'll save as template. So we will just save this as a template. And now when I go to a new project, you could come here. So if you wanted to, and you could right click on the templates and say reveal in Finder or reveal in Explorer, and that will do that. Also, you could just come over here to your edit menu and you could save a profile, which would be all of your preferences, your key commands, your macros, all of your settings, your plugin settings, presets that you've made, templates. They could all be exported within your user profile as well. So I would try those two things. Okay, so we have people checking in from Finland. All right, so we have Calgary in Canada. We got Pablo checking in from, I believe, Galicia, Spain. Okay, so need help for vocal chops, need to understand how to make glides in Groove Agent SE. So let's take a look. So I may have a couple vocal files. Okay, so let's say I just wanted to go to Groove Agent SE. And I just have a blank track, so I'm going to take just a vocal file here. So what I could do now, I have my vocal in there. You could just, and this could always be, I will choose to go to my slice menu. We'll create slices, and you could adjust the threshold for the slices. And as you do that, and as you do this also, you could just say, I want it to, this will create just a pattern. So if I wanted to drag that pattern, I'll move it over here. So if we want to just take this particular pattern, so now if you wanted to just change like the MIDI notes of this pattern, you could just kind of and be able to kind of just change the notes around. So now you do just some. So, and let's say I just wanted to reverse these. So you could just, come over here and just kind of do, and I don't really have material that's kind of prepared to do that, but now you could also, if you want to do like some pitch stuff with the instruments, you could also just select each one of these. And if you want to go to like, you could pitch these. So let's say, and you could also do like pitch envelopes. So if you want to just take this and so you could do kind of extreme. If you wanted to, or let's just do. And some people will also just kind of do a lot of, different glides and stuff using the sample, the sampler track as well. But that should give you an idea of how to start doing, different vocal chops pretty easily in Groove Agent. Hi, Greg. Should I bust stereo or mono tracks into my 5.1 surround mix? This is a museum soundscape mix, not a music mix. Yeah, you could definitely do that. And one thing that's also handy, if you're doing, let's say, a 5.1 environment, so it will come to, let's say, the audio connections, and I'll go to my outputs, and if I have a 5.1 out, one of the things, if you wanted to treat and be able to access and route stuff easily to different areas, is if you come here, you could also just add, you could add a child bus, and this is something a lot of people don't know. So now you could say, okay, I wanted to add the stereo out to the front, and I wanted to add another child bus, and we'll say this is going to be for our left surround, right surround. And as we wanted to route the audio from different devices, if I wanted all of my ambiences to go to my 5.1 out, where we could just, and we look at this, we could have our 5.1 panner, but maybe the music track, instead of having separate buses, I could just route it to the stereo out within the 5.1. So this way you could, route, your audio to kind of wherever you want. But, this way you don't necessarily have to have like a separate stereo bus. You could have one 5.1 out bus and be able to go to the connections and define different, so select the bus here, and then you could add different child buses within that as you need it. So you could have a lot of flexibility for routing, and it's perfect for like soundscapes, for installations and museums and stuff like that. So I know, like in New York City, there's a big exhibit by National Geographic, Ocean Odyssey, and it was kind of all done in Nuendo, and a lot of those techniques were used for that. But I think some of it was, up to 38 channels for the exhibit. It's pretty cool, done by David Kahn, who's an amazingly talented guy. Okay, so question, could you please tell us how to fade in and out MIDI tracks? I mean, if it's a start or end with a single note. So, MIDI, what you could do is, I'll just grab one, I'll just do a new project here. Jump back to this one, and just revert this quickly, and we'll add. So, MIDI can work a little differently than some of its audio counterparts. So when we come here, I will add just a quick kind of drone-esque sound. So let's just do a pad shop. Okay, so let's say I will just record one single note of this. Okay, now if we wanted to fade in and fade out, there's a couple of different ways. So with any instrument you could use, you go into your MIDI editor, and you could just come right over here and draw in main volume, CC7. So if I wanted to do this, I could say, let's fade up, and then at the end, fade down. So as we listen to this, this will send a MIDI continuous controller message. So that's a way you can do it. If it's a VST 3.5 instrument, like Pad Shop, Hallian Sonic, Retrolog, you could double click and go to like the note expression and just choose to, I'll show you. So the cool thing is, because a lot of times when we do different editing, like a MIDI CC message will actually be for every single note on a channel. With the VST 3.5 instrument, we could just have different volume controls. So I could say, and I'm just going to take my snap off. So let's say I want the low note to fade in, and I wanted the higher pitched note here to fade out. So that will start higher and gradually fade out. So you could have independent note messages. So when you look at this, so if we want to listen, so probably the world's worst audio example of that, but you get the sense that you could have independent volume messages. Now, once you have this, you could also just adjust your MIDI volume from right here. So if I wanted to automate this, you could just activate W and R, and then so you could just come right over here. And you can see that you could also have that as automation, but that's not going to be on a note by note basis. So there's, you could use automation for the audio characteristics. You could use, MIDI volume, CC7. You could also do note expression to do individual notes within a part. So that's how you could do it. I know some people, I've seen a lot of people go, oh, why can't I just have a fade handle here like we do for audio? And it's a bit different for MIDI than for audio. So okay. So it says, I have a question on how to set expression map on third-party plugins. So it's really, you kind of come right over here, go to your MIDI menu. You could set it on the particular area, and then you could just start building maps. So you could say, slot 1 does, the remote note is this, and then, you could just start adding, all of the different articulations that will be incorporated here. So, it works not only for Steinberg instruments, but, for any instrument that does key switches. You're able to, set up your own expression maps, and then really once you have it all done with whatever key switch or MIDI message that's being used for that, you could come in and, say this will be pits. This is whatever articulation, label it, and then they will, when you get to your articulations and dynamics, they could automatically just show up here in this particular lane. So it's, it works. It's a lot of people assume it's kind of limited for Steinberg instruments, but you can build expression maps for hardware instruments or for any sample library. And one of the beautiful things is most of the people that have created expression maps freely share them. So if you just do a Google search, you could probably find expression maps for most instruments and libraries that are available. So that's the first thing I would do. Okay. Okay, so we have a question. If I open polyphonic audio clip in spectral layers, extension, and isolate just one repeating tone, so you only hear that one later, can I export MIDI from that audio without having to render it first? You would have to, you'd have to do the bounce selection. You'd have to do from the audio menu. Once you do that, you go to the audio menu and you would just choose to bounce selection, and then that would be rendered as an audio file. There may be some workflow enhancements, and I know there's some discussion of different workflow enhancements to make that a little better, perhaps for future versions. But I think what the Spectral Layer 7 does is pretty amazing, especially the unmixing stems is pretty mind-boggling. It's like taking the eggs out of a cake after it's been made. Okay, so we see Hurricane Alley checking in, Byron. All right, so you see Pablo saying, yay, Greg Icy Pro. So, okay, so we have Air Davies, hi team Cubase from UK. Thanks, Greg, for the Hangouts. Very cool, bro. So thanks, we're glad they're helpful. All right, so Byron is on coastal North Carolina, so he probably got a lot of rain overnight. I got it in Virginia early this morning, so I think it's starting to get almost sunny outside now. Okay, so question, how do you do low latency monitoring for recording an acoustic instrument, not virtual instrument, when you have other processing in effect? Thanks, using 10.5 Pro. So, a lot of times when you do it, there is no special difference or trick based on, if it's a VST instrument versus an acoustic instrument. The one thing that could be really helpful is, let's just do a new project. Let me just do an empty one. Is, if you're doing a lot of acoustic instruments and, if it's for monitoring, you could, let me just set this up. Some audio interfaces like the Steinberg UR series have built-in DSP. So let me just bypass the control room here. Okay, and I'm just going to remove my Ambisonics bus. So, a lot of the different interfaces can have, built-in hardware DSP. So here, if I wanted to, let me just set mono input here really quickly. So with like the UR24C, which is I'm using, or any of the UR interfaces, you could come directly here and have built-in reverb that you monitor with. And as soon as you could adjust the send here, and you could also have different effects. So if you said I wanted to have a guitar amp or a morphing channel strip, you could have built-in compression and EQ directly from the audio interface. And that's really kind of the intention is, it's being powered by the DSP on the interface. Once you do that, so that could alleviate, so you could hear reverb and you could have compression and EQ applied directly to the file itself. So if you don't have a kind of a DSP assisted interface, what you would probably want to do is to come over here and you could try to constrain delay compensation. And that will bypass a lot of the plugins that you're kind of working with. In really critical situations, I know a lot of people will bounce everything to a stereo file and just play the stereo file and what they're tracking depending on the plugins that they're using. So there's no super easy answer, but a lot of the audio interfaces like the Steinberg UR series will allow you to kind of, resolve, because it is an issue, and they will allow you to have built-in DSP to monitor for tracking, which is really helpful. So, but, try the constrained delay compensation and that should help. All right, good to see Michael from Weatherford, Texas. All right, so we have Terry from Minneapolis checking in. Haven't been at Minneapolis in a long time. Always enjoy going there. Okay, so it says I sometimes from Pinder I sometimes can't change color of tracks any other way unless I do so from the bottom of the mixer channel window. So let's just go ahead and I'll add a number of tracks. So there's a couple ways that you could try Pinder. So you could click here to select colors. I also change colors on individual tracks just by clicking on the color icon here and then selecting. And you could also just grab, I'm not sure if you've used a color tool, but you could take the selected tracks. And sometimes people will confuse realizing that tracks and parts could be independent. So even though these are on the same track, if you have an event selected, like the event may change, but not the track. So, try those things and see if they make a difference. So, you can do it from the mixer. You could also just click here from the inspector tab or select the color tool, and you'll have kind of your color drop down menu that you could change colors for the selected tracks as well. So let's make this kind of red-ish. So give those things a try. Okay, so it's calling from Lonehead in Scotland. Just started using VST Connect Pro with Cubase 10.5 Pro. Works great with my Scarlett 2i2. Haven't been able to get it work pro. Okay, so maybe Derek, if you could ask your question. So it says just started using VST Connect Pro with Cubase 10.5 Pro. It says it works great with my Scarlett 2i2. Haven't been able to get it work pro. So I'm not sure what I haven't been able to get it work pro, if that's with the VST Connect Pro or with or if you give me a little more context, that would be helpful. Okay, so Jason, okay, saw his. So, high grade question. IC Pro, is there a way to get the ruler to show bars and beats and not just seconds? All right, so I don't have the IC Pro where you could look at it, so I will come over here. Let's add a ruler track. Okay. Okay, so you want to see, so IC Pros are a way to get the ruler to show bars and beats and not just seconds. So let me get my, it's probably boring to watch. I have to, so get my, all right, so let's get my IC Pro and see if I could get it to switch. Okay. So when I do this, I see bars and beats and so I see the time display kind of at the top of the window. And then just when I tap on so I see it in absolute time. And then I'm not sure if this is what you're talking about, Jason. But when I just click on, like, I see 1 minute, 55 seconds, which is probably where we're at. So let's say if I just expand this to show. So this is the value I see. And then at the top of the window, I just click, and then it shows me the value. It switches between the master, between the two different primary and secondary time format. So that's how. So I'm not sure if that's what you're asking, but it looks like you could just tap there to see. But I'm not sure if that's switching. If you want to see this ruler track switch between the two, and we may be able to set that in the key commands. Let me just click on the settings. And now my iPad keyboard is misbehaving. So I'm not sure if you just want to switch the time format on the iPad or if you wanted to switch this time format. So let me see if it's addressable as a keyboard shortcut. So it looks like maybe under Edit. Okay, so I just added a function for a ruler display format. And this is triggering from the key commands. All right, so let me see if I'll just play around with this just a little bit more and we'll move on to see if I can't figure it out. So it looks like I could switch between the two time formats, but maybe not switch like this particular rule or track. But if you want to just switch to time formats, just click at the time display at the top of the iPad. But if I'm misunderstanding, just let me know. Okay, so I see, sorry, Derek's question kind of got split. I guess other people got their comments in. So calling from Lonehead in Scotland to start using VST Connect Pro with Cubase 10.5 Pro. It works great with my Scarlett 202. Haven't been able to get it to work properly with my Behringer XR18. So it's really kind of the same setup between the two. So I would just check to make sure that there's no routing in the Behringer XR18, because a lot of times, sometimes those may, depending on the routing of the mixer. But, as soon as you go to, it would be, if it works great with your Scarlett 2i2, you should be able to just mimic settings, but maybe the input isn't defined correctly in the XR18, or it's being routed or bused somewhere else to signal. So okay, so we have a question. In new SL7, if you select a fundamental of a vocal note, will the app automatically select for you all the many concurrent harmonics above? So let's take a look. We can show you how to do that. There is a harmonic selection mode in Spectral Layers. So I'll just show you really quickly how you can find the harmonics. And this is a very powerful part of Spectral Layers. So I'm just going to duplicate this track and okay, so we'll come over here to your extensions. I think you can do this in, I may have Spectral Layer 6 that might show up here. So we have, let's say, our vocal. And as we zoom in, we could see kind of like the harmonic content. So if I want to, you could go to this pitch selection tool and choose harmonic selection. And now what you could do is, as you kind of select your different components, you can see how the overtone series will get selected just like that. So if you wanted to just kind of zoom in, you could see how incredibly powerful that is to not have to select every single overtone in the harmonic overtone series just like that. So once again, come here in Spectral Layers and choose to you click on this icon. So click with the left mouse and then the right mouse button and choose the harmonic selection. And then you should be kind of all set with that. Okay. Okay, we have Daryl Lloyd checking in. All right. Okay, how to have Cubase automatically save files on an external drive. So, as you start a project, if it's going to be like the audio files, I always, when you start with the Steinberg hub, I just say prompt for project file location. And then let's say I will just come here. And now when we do this, we could define where all the audio files will be stored. So that could be routed directly to an external drive. You could also, just do a save. So whenever you save the project, if you do a save, you could direct it to where it's going to be, on an external drive, or save as you could set to an external drive. So a lot of times I have just an external drive routed for all of my audio projects. It's separate than my sample drive. So those are a couple ways of doing it. So when you start a new project, just get a new project and then prompt for, project location. It'll use default location by default. Just prompt for project location. And then you just could save everything on the external drive. Okay. Okay, reading through comments. Thanks for all the great comments and questions. And if you've learned something new already, please feel free to hit the like button. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, make sure you do that. All right, my chat field just kind of jumped. Let me see if I can navigate back. Bear with me. Okay. Hi, Greg. Can you go over how to edit generic controller, trying to get transport controls to control Cubase on my KeyStation 88? So a lot of times a lot of controllers may just use like a Mackie control for transport. So if it does that, you could just click on add generic remote. Or if it's your transport is often set up as Mackie, so you could just do Mackie control and route, and then the transport is often covered that way. If it's not, you could do it through generic remote. So I will come here and say, let me just move a couple cables on top of my controller here. So I have some transport buttons on my controller. Let's see what they do. So let's say if I hit, I'm going to click on MIDI Learn. I'm going to say that we're going to set up which input ports. I'm using a Nectar here. So I will click on MIDI Learn. So I just hit the record button. And what I want this to do now, so we can think of this as a 1-to-1 relationship. So this object is now going to be set for, and we'll say transport. And I want this to be device, and we will choose to do record. And for fader 2, I want this to be play, stop. So I will come here, learn, and fader 2 will now be set up for, again, transport. And let's just say start. So now when I come here, I can hit, the button and just do, that's kind of all you have to do to really kind of just set up, your play and start commands just for that. So set it up, hit the button and that will do the MIDI learn for you. And then that's really kind of all the different routing that you would have to do for that. So think of this as the incoming MIDI message, and this is the function that you want it to do. I see a nice wow comment from Ed Bowler. So maybe that was when we got his question answered, or maybe something else that impressed him. So if you say wow, you have to give it a thumbs up. All right. Okay, so we have a question. Is there a way to make the marker track to stay on top of the timeline? So when you go up and down, it's right there. So we could do something called a divided track list. So so let's say if I have markers here, all right. So now what I want to do is I'll put this at the top, my marker tracks. I may have to get my sun set up here. And then you'll have this little icon here where you could divide the track list. Excuse me one sec. Yeah, Ryan. So once it's in our divided track list, and we could turn that on and off right here. I could scroll up and down. So if I have like, 100 more tracks of audio, I could just continually scroll and keep those tracks anchored to the top. So again, you want to just activate. Once it's active, you click there, but in the upper right hand corner right there. And then you'll have kind of two different timelines. I'm going to go help my son get something on TV. I'll be right back. Bear with me. Sorry about that. My son wanted me to make an electronics kit with him. All right. Okay, so it's a question. Does Cubase have a limited number of lanes that would prevent me from cycle recording an hour's worth of kick snare on a stereo track to a short loop? How do I then merge lanes together as I track? So I don't think there's going to be any limit to the number of lanes that are available. The only limit would be your hard drive space. So you should be able to do an hour's worth of kick or snare and a stereo track and short loop. How do I merge lanes together as a track? So, really all you'd have to do is just to kind of select the different lane areas. And so, and just simply select two different parts. And so if you have two different audio sections here, you could even just choose to select these and do, if you have the two files, the two tracks selected. So we'll come over here and try just a quick render in place. And you go to render settings and you'll have an option where you could merge the files together. Let me see if I can help my son one more time. Maybe. So you could try that to merge. Sorry, my son's a little upset, so you may hear him in the background, but I think my wife is trying to help. So apologize for the delay. Okay, so let me... Okay, so question from Pinder one more time for old time's sake. How to set up a randomizer velocity with logical editor. It would have been helpful if Cubase allowed us to use the given presets as a template to build on Cubase. Okay, so let me just go back to project here. I think we have some drums. All right, so sorry, you have to listen to screaming. Sorry. All right, so if I wanted to randomize velocities, let's say these are all going to be fixed. So I would go to my logical editor, and you can save this as a preset if you want. We will say, let's take our note messages. And what I want to do is we're going to take value 2, which is velocity. So in here, we're going to say value 2. And we could set random values between 80 and 120. So now when I hit apply, you could just have those random values set. Okay. Okay, so we have a question. Hey, Greg, a musician friend and I both have Cubase Pro 10.5, and when he sends me music that he records with his Mo X6, I cannot edit at all. Is there a way he can mix down with the sounds included? You know, you could definitely record them as audio. Also, so, you know, if you don't have a Mo X6, you know, he could definitely just, you know, have the MIDI information. You know, and as you do this, you could also, I think if we go to, you know, there is a Mo, you know, a Mo XF editor as well. So if you wanted to come over here, you can just add like an instrument. We could choose for this to be external. And when you add the track, I don't have it actually physically connected. It's like kind of looking for the USB connection. And then at this point, you could just see all of the different patches to edit. But, you know, it's nothing really proprietary. He could record it as audio. If he doesn't have this, he could just simply render the VST instrument or freeze the VST instrument directly from within the editor, and then when he passes on the project to you, it could just include the rendered audio files, and that'd probably be the easiest way. Okay. Okay, so question from Tyler Mills. I'm torn between using my 8700K desktop PC and my Mac Mini with an 8700B eGPU as my main Cubase rig. Both have large SSDs with all my sample libraries. Wonder what the chat here thinks. You know, I think probably going to be, you know, depending on the RAM and configurations, they may be pretty similar. And, you know, maybe you could do a test and run the same projects and see if there's, you know, see if there's different you know, what you find as the difference. Okay. So, question from Gareth. Good to see Gareth on the Hangout. Fussy technical query with marker tracks. Is it possible to select a range to edit cut, but when combined selection tools on the range options don't work despite being in range mode? So let's go ahead and add a marker track. Okay, so let's say if I want to come here, I'll just hit And let's see. So I can see where there's, let me see if the events have to be selected with the range. So I can see that since there isn't anything, let's see if I do a global. Okay, so if I do kind of a global marker, and let's see if I just do Shift X. So let's get my range function here. So when we do insert silence, that kind of took care of it globally. And let's just get to the range and choose cut time. So it could be that since if you're just on the marker tracks, it may have to have other events that are selected for that to carry over. So let's see if I just selected one MIDI or audio part and then just do cut time. You can see that that carries over, and I'll try just on the marker track itself. And so it looks like you may not trigger it from keyboard shortcuts, but if you do it from, just from the menus, that seems to kind of be working. But so give that a try and see if it's maybe the keyboard shortcuts are kind of allocated to something else. But it looks like those markers kind of when driving it from the menu work, and see if you find the same thing on your end, Gareth. Okay, let's move on. Sorry for the interruptions earlier. My son's been cooped up. We've had a lot of rain the last couple days, so. Okay, just reading through different comments. Thanks for all the great questions. I'm back to being La Leche, my honorary title. Okay, so I just see the question. I have selected a voice I recorded, but I could not select generate harmony voices. So I will just randomly import an audio file here. And I think you could do the generate harmony voices. So it's just. So when I come here, it's just going to. So you could definitely do it now. Like in this case, I don't have the chord track, but it seemed to be able to work. So if you want to send me a screenshot, maybe you could email to clubcubase at steinberg.de. That'd be, I could maybe take a look at your system. Okay. So, hey, Greg, is there any way to record the sounds directly from the VST window? So I'm not sure what VST window you're meaning. So if it's like from the VST instrument, you could, if you have like an instrument track loaded up here. So I think we have a pad shop sound. And let me just check my connections here quickly. Oh, it's pan, sorry. So if you want to record directly from the instrument itself, a lot of software MIDI keyboards don't transmit MIDI, but if you hit Alt or Option K, you can just kind of come right over here. And this could be a software MIDI controller that you could use your computer keyboard. So if you don't have one, but if I'm misunderstanding, let me know. And if you wanted to record the sounds as audio as you play it, there's a way of doing that as well. So I could have this sound and I could, route this particular channel to a group. So I'll add a group channel to the selected channels and we'll add the track. So here's our group channel. And now I want to add an audio track. And this audio track, I want to set it to the group. So I will arm that for record. I'll put these right underneath each other, or right on top of each other. So now I could record both MIDI and audio simultaneously from the VST. So this is what you need. So let me just... So as we just record this, and that way you could record from the VST directly. But if I'm misunderstanding, let me know. So it says, Greg, can I see your computer performance CPU usage? So I'll just kind of come right over here. You can see just kind of my audio performance meter. Okay. Okay, question. I need to extract MIDI from my microtonal sound design to make Spitfire samples track along, but their libraries won't pitch bend. Will Vari Audio smooth out the MIDI pitch jumps in resulting audio? So a lot of times, if you have, let's say a vocal file like we have here, I don't think Spitfire is using a VST3 playback engine, but if it did, once we go into Vari Audio at this point, we'll do its analysis of the file. And when you go to your functions, you could choose to extract the MIDI. So this would kind of allow you to do different microtonal, but you have, as part of how we indicated before, that we could do like the independent, volume on notes using VST expression and note expression information. Here, when we do an extraction, we could have a much higher resolution data with the VST3 tuning curve. So if you extract it with that, that would give you, much higher resolution than what you get with a standard MIDI pitch bend. But that would take a VST3 instrument to kind of track that accurately. So, and if it's using like a contact as a player, it's not going to be capable of doing that. So, but using something like Hallion would give you a much more accurate representation. I'll play you just a quick example where we could look at it, where you could hear it. I think I have kind of like a saxophone that I did using kind of standard. One I did using kind of standard MIDI data, and one I used using kind of the extended VST3. So just to kind of give you an idea here, we'll say this is our original saxophone audio file. So all those subtleties can often get lost with most MIDI to, extraction from audio. And often, especially like, some of the world's worst things you could do is a bad MIDI saxophone. It can sound like this. But when we did with the note expression data, and this is kind of what it sounds like with the note expression data that's extracted. So if I wanted to play that with the real saxophone, we can see how tightly that mimicked the real musical characteristics. So we'll solo both of those instruments together. So that'll give you an idea of the level of expressivity or the level of expression that you could have using the VST3 expanded capabilities. Okay. So question, what freeze option does for CPU usage? So if you have a virtual instrument that's using, a lot of CPU power, let's say, and if you choose to freeze the instrument or the track, what that's going to allow you to do is to, if this is, taking 20% of your computer, you could click on the little snowflake, and what that will do is render the file in the background. So it's going to unload the instrument. At that point, it's just going to play back an audio file. So if you have, like different instruments are taking a lot of your CPU's processing powers, freezing it just allows it to play back a simple audio file and will free up those system resources. Hey Greg, I have a MIDI part with pitch bend data. I want to set this CC pitch bend data to bend an audio file. Is there a way to use CC pitch bend on an audio file to match MIDI parts? There isn't a way to do it, and it's kind of, they're kind of in different camps and, different villages almost when doing that. So generally audio is not going to be as responsive to MIDI CC pitch bend data. So what some people will, some people do some very creative things and, do all sorts of very, you could do, very audio type things to audio. So if you wanted to change the pitch, it's not going to be directly where it's, copy this, volume information, from MIDI volume to automation and copy, and it's going to apply because, pitch bend can be set to different ranges for MIDI. So you could have the full pitch bend range in 2 semitones or an octave or 2 octaves. So it's not going to directly translate. But what people often do is when we come here, we could go into your very audio, and as soon as we do just the analysis, At this point, you could choose to select, your different segments. And as we do that, you could pitch bend up and, be able to do that. But it's not going to be a copy the data from a MIDI track to an audio track. Okay. Question, is there a way to import a complete file from another DAW, Ableton Live, for example? We don't have provisions to, and we don't really try to allow you to import files directly from other companies. We've had companies do it to us very unsuccessfully. It's kind of, there's some standard translation protocols. People will get MIDI over through a standard MIDI file. People will get audio over through an OMF or AAF or just simply using time-stamped audio files. But there isn't a way, and we could spend a lot of time doing it, and, we've never really pursued anything like that. But, it's always the problem of if you do that and then, something changes in the project file structure in the company, and then it could just totally make everything not work. So it's not probably worth pursuing so much, but, use MIDI files, use an OMF, use an AF file, and it's pretty easy to, or just simply timestamp files. And it's pretty easy to get information from different programs back and forth. Okay. I see Gareth commenting on it as well. Okay, so and this is probably going back to where we were before. So is there a way to record directly from the VST window? I tried to record MIDI and audio track by setting up a group track in Sends, but that doesn't record any of the changes I would like to hear. For example, I would like to record the changes in sound when changing the knobs in Pad Shop. Okay, so we kind of had that Pad Shop example. So it definitely should, record the different sounds in Pad Shop. So I think if we still have this set up here, I'll activate the project. So we'll come and I'll have both of these armed for record. And let's say, so we'll have Pad Shop, and I'll just turn this down just a little bit. Okay, so I'll just move that knob as we're recording both the audio and MIDI simultaneously. So now as we go back to our audio file, we'll take a listen to it here. So I'll just solo that. So that was just the audio. So it does record all of the audio. So I'm just routing it to a group, and the group is being routed directly to, and you could probably do the same thing through the Sends, how you may have done it. But all the changes that you make on the knobs in Pad Shop will just automatically be carried over because it's just recording the sound of it. So let me know if that doesn't work for you, but I think that's kind of what you wanted to do. I luckily used Pad Shop from your previous question. Okay. Okay, reading through comments. Hello from Sweden. Just wondering when we're going to see Cubase as a VST host for like Discord, so we can use EQ, comp, and so on. So I'm not familiar with Discord. So when are we going to use Cubase as a VST host for like Discord? So I'm not familiar. Maybe if you could, poppers, let me know what the Discord program is. Okay. So we have a question. Hi, Greg. Jay from New Haven, Connecticut. What is required for Dolby Atmos encryption, decryption licenses or hardware or what? I can't find any clear answer. Anytime I ask, people try to sell some hardware. So it used to be to encode a Dolby Atmos, you would have to have the RMU, which is the expensive hardware piece from Dolby. And that's what was needed to actually author an Atmos compliant file. Then Dolby released a plugin or that you could use called the Dolby Renderer. And I don't think most people run. I think it's predominantly on Mac platform. I'm not sure if it's available for Windows. So to author something that would be played back and to be rendered in Adobe, you'd need to have the Dolby the Atmos renderer. But there could always be other developments. Technically to have a Dolby Atmos studio, it has to be certified by Dolby, and Dolby sends someone to do it, so it's quite an involved process, but you'll need to have the software from Dolby at this point. Okay. Okay. Hello, Greg. Hope you are well. Is there any way to import drum loop with Wave Rex 2 format and change the tempo of notes? I don't think I have any Rex 2 formats, but we were the first company to do that. But if you have a drum loop, something else that you could do is, I will add a quick instrument track. You could use like Groove Agent SE for this as well. So if you have just a simple drum loop, I'll just come over here. Let's go to my loops. So if I just want to take a drum loop here, I can then just at this point, I could choose to slice the drum loop and just kind of drop the pattern directly into the timeline on my Groove Agent track. So all you have to do is, as soon as I come over here, we'll just create our slices. Now each slice is automatically just kind of dropped right in. And if you wanted to trigger these from your MIDI keyboard, you could do that, or just drag and drop the pattern that it's created directly in. And you could change the pattern just kind of, very similar to working with like a Rex file. So if you want to change notes around, just change the pitch of those notes to get a different take on the drum loop. So you could do stuff like that, but you could just drag and drop Rex files in. It'll automatically follow tempo. We've been doing that since the 90s. So, okay, Greg or some guys, how many LUFS is recommended for a mastered song track? -14 or -23. So if you're not familiar, LUFS is a loudness unit measurement. So it stands for loudness unit full scale. And you could see in the control room, if you go to your metering options, you could just see your loudness meter here. So generally, broadcast is set to minus 23 LUFS. So if you're composing for film or TV, that's a good working area to aim for. A lot of different online services, I think Spotify is set to minus 14 LUFS is kind of what they're expecting for their encoding and transcoding. So, it depends on where your final source is going to end up. So if you want it to be, available to streamed, probably aim at minus 14. If it's for broadcast, aim for minus 23. Are my legacy templates, routing, and plugins all preserved after Cubase version upgrade? Yes. So all the information will kind of be carried over from previous versions. A lot of times you'll be asked if you wanted to do it, but they're all there and can be just automatically carried over into latest versions. Okay, so just reading through comments. Thanks for all the great questions and discussion. All right, so let's go ahead. Just reading. Okay, so we kind of have someone just keep asking the same questions about the Rex 2 format. So yeah, it just automatically puts Rex 2 files in. So I just see question, hey, I'm having trouble with graphic errors, how to fix that, and it's only in Cubase 10. So it could be, like if you're on a Windows platform, if you go to your preferences, we can just kind of come directly to the general area on preferences, and it's not on Mac, so I can't really show it to you, but you'll see something that says use high DPI. So you maybe try to, not all plugins will scale appropriately for high DPI usage. So you may want to just simply try unchecking use high DPI and see if that makes a difference for you. That may clear up some graphics issues with scaling. Okay. Okay, so just reading. I'm scoring to picture and I'm changing tempo very often, but then my grid stays as it is. Question is there a way to reset the grid at the beginning of a bar when a tempo change happens? So let's take a look. Just get a video file open. Okay, so let's say if we have different tempo changes going on in our picture. So let's just say, okay, we have some different tempos going on here. So is there a way to reset the grid on the beginning of the bar when tempo changes happen? So, if you come over here, so I'm going to move the tempo up to the top. And I'll make this just a little larger. And you could use kind of what's called the time warp tool. So I'm not sure if you've experimented with this. And what this will allow you to do, and especially if we have under transport, you say use edit follows video mode. At this point, I could move the measures to be right at specific time values. So you say, right at the end of this scene, I wanted that measure 11 or measure 13 to be there. And I need 4 bars to fit into the music from here to here. So if I play, that will be 4 bars. And I wanted, 4 bars to fit until we're right here at this scene, that transition. So you could have your different tempo changes and have that snap to the video, and that way the tempo changes are actually kind of just snapping to the video frames. So see if that works. If that doesn't, just leave a quick comment. We may be able to catch up to it towards the end of the Hangout. Yeah, so, and then, so you say, so you don't start the new tempo in the middle of the bar, you could just move the bar, and then the tempo can follow just like that. Okay. Okay, we'll just kind of keep reading through comments and some topics that we got through afterwards. So, the question is Steinberg ever going to fix high DPI support for Windows? It's becoming a serious problem. There's a lot of plugins that don't scale correctly, so some of it is out of our context and out of our realm to fix. But I'm sure that there's going to be improvements coming. It's obviously a big undertaking in a program and to get different scaling resolutions. So I'm sure developers are working on it. All right, I got a revelation for Gareth and slicing a vocal in Groove Agent. I feel worthy now of hosting a Hangout. So, okay, just reading through comments. Okay, so discussion of virus protection and on their audio computers. Okay, just reading through comments still. A lot of great discussion. Okay, so it says, thank you for Groove Agent. Please, can you tell how you can use chord track? So let's take a look. So, chord track is really, does some pretty amazing things, especially kind of initially starting an idea of a song. So let's say if I'm here and we're just playing around a little bit with, and I'm just coming up with the initial idea. Maybe I have a quick drum loop. So what I could do is just have a chord track, and let's see if I have, let me just load up an instrument sound here quickly, just so we can hear. So if I wanted to just kind of come up with different ideas, let's say we'll start with an F chord. I want it to go to maybe a B flat, and let's end on a C chord. So we could audition kind of different chord ideas. Now, if we have, and a lot of times it's very easy to get into like a musical rut with chords. So what's interesting is we could actually, if we don't know a good chord, we're looking for something maybe different to go between B flat and C. We could actually have the program give us an idea based on musical proximity or based on circle of fifths, what chords could work. And there's also just kind of a list mode, and we could say I want it to have, complex chords or less complex. I want it to be by common notes or by cadence. So I could just say, let's try a D minor chord. Or a G minor chord. So the program could actually give you suggestions based on the actual musical context of doing an analysis before or after the fact. Now, if we're doing this and we give it to our guitar player friend and they're like, yeah, we don't play in the key of F very much. It's not a very guitar-oriented key. It's more like for trumpets and brass. We could just choose to transpose. And now, like if the singer wasn't feeling the key, you could do that. And if you wanted to, change the chords, say let's make it a B7th. And let's make it with an F sharp in the bass. And say we don't like the inversion. So very cool for like trying out initial ideas, and then I could just drag these down and it will actually make MIDI data of it. Now the chord track can also be really good at taking an existing part, and we could have different so if I have like a quick orchestral thing and I wanted to try different chords, what you're able to do is I'll just kind of take this and I could have all these tracks follow the chords. So I could say, let's make this the key of D. And now all the different MIDI parts can just kind of change. And let's say I want to do chord change coming here. And I want it to be an E chord. And let's say I just want to do like a quick turnaround, so I want like an F sharp minor to a G, and let's say to an A 7th chord. And let's say as we do this, I want this to be a minor chord instead. And it's changing all the notes in here. So if I switch this to like a B minor chord, we'll see that all the notes will just change there. So this way the chord track can kind of drive the tonality. So that'll give you an idea of some of the stuff that you can do with chord track. But, I see so many people that kind of, we all know the guitarist, the piano player, the keyboard player sits down and they play the same chords every time they approach the instrument. And now we could actually kind of, try different chords and different tonalities that you may not explore otherwise, and be able to change it for multiple parts quickly. Okay, so let's move on. Okay, so we had a question on using Groove Agent 5. So let me go back to project here. Thanks for all the great questions. Okay, how to control open hi-hat in the kit, pressure system patterns. Let me just see if we have, I'll just get rid of some files here from this. Okay, so, all right, so let's say if I come here to Groove Agent, let's see if it's a particular style. Okay, so it says, all right, how to control hi-hat, open hi-hat in the kit. Okay, so, okay, let me just switch to the kit. Okay, so just make sure, see if I'm, okay, so pressure system patterns. Okay, so I don't see the pressures, if that was a particular library, but let's just, come back here. So let's do just initialize. So here's the kit. Okay, so control open hi-hat. So I think it's probably just going to be one of the, let's see. So I'm not sure. So we say control the high. So how to control open hi-hat in the kit pressure system pattern. So I mean, it's just a MIDI note message that triggers the hi-hat. So it's just a B flat 1. So I'll just make this a little louder. You know, so I'm not sure what pressure system patterns is, Eric. So maybe if you could ask again, if we have time, we could circle back to it. Sorry if I'm being dense. So question, is it possible to detect, find, select audio tracks in a project that do not contain any waveform in them? I don't think that there's a way of doing it. I know some people will, to get rid of them, just do a detect silence feature. So that's a pretty common thing to do as well. But let me just, I think I was looking for something like this in the project logical editor to see if it did it. So let's say, but there isn't like a threshold, I believe, but let me just take a look. So we'll say MIDI type is equal to audio. So you could do it if it's empty. All right, so just kind of. So this might do the trick. So if we just say function select, so if you say it doesn't have waveforms, so maybe if it doesn't have a part or the waveform is really, really small, the amplitude, like it's recorded silence. So this might do the trick. So say function select, and you say media type is equal to audio property, and property set to event is empty, and see if that does it for you. But I think if there's a recording, that there's still data there, even if it's no amplitude. And if that's the case, so let's say if I had a couple of loops going on, and I had this repeated a couple of times, and this is, let's say, one audio file in the system. So let's say if I'll bounce the selection, and we'll just enlarge this. So a way to kind of get rid of stuff like that is just coming to, you go to audio, and this may help if you're looking to kind of isolate and get rid of stuff. But I think it's under advanced, you'll see detect silence. And at this point, you could kind of set the threshold and say, it's going to cut out, those different parts, and we could strip the silence of that. So we'll just say, let's go ahead and process, and that will kind of get rid of, different parts. And you could set the threshold so that you don't have a lot of audio files for the middle of silence. So okay. All right, good to see Terry Dean on a Hangout. Okay, so I just see a comment. I need DSP in my interface, a big smiley face. And I think this is referring to having maybe the DSP on the UR series. So you have the built-in reverb with no latency. Okay, so we have Paulie checking in from Arizona. So he missed the first hour. We'll have the link posted maybe early tomorrow of all the index. Okay, and Jazz Dude has a good suggestion. I've passed this on to many people for Windows users that are maybe having latency issues. Is go to the DPC latency monitor from Resplendent software, and that could isolate different aspects. So we have a question from Ted. I see you can import Rex files, but will Cubase export in Rex format? I don't think it exports Rex format. I think that's limited to, that might be kind of fixed to Propellerhead products to do that, but you could, just drag and drop the looped audio file into a Groove Agent project and, have the same functionality, really. Okay, hi Greg. Does Cubase have a way to adjust velocity per key, or is that normally a library feature? I know VSL Pianos does that. Controllers are definitely not perfect. Laughing out loud. So you could definitely, take, if you have, let's say, even a drum recording here, and let's look at the velocity of the hi-hats, and let's say these are all different, and let's say like maybe you find in one particular one particular note on a piano sample that it's not consistent, and it could be really hard for the sample developers to make, if you have 30 velocity layers per piano, to make every velocity exactly the same. I've come across many libraries with kind of velocity inconsistencies. So you could say, I wanted to take, through a logical editor preset. If you find, and I know people that, are programming like, very intense piano things, and they know exactly what velocities work for the voicings. But you could say, I want to take note, we'll transform and we'll say type is equal to note. And we could say value 2 of a note message is velocity. And we could say when velocity is inside the range of 75 to 90, we want to take the velocity and subtract 3. So, and you could do this for a particular note message. So you could say, and the pitch is equal to, so say value 1 is equal to, let's say, G5. So every time you have a G5 note that has a velocity between 75 and 90, you could decrease the velocity by 3. So, you could definitely go through and set up conditions like that to kind of make up for inadequacies of your MIDI controller or the library, or how your MIDI controller kind of, respond, how the library will respond to the MIDI controller. But you could definitely do stuff like that. Okay, question. How do you drag an audio event or instrument part from track to track while constraining the timing? Move or nudge an event from track to track so the event arrives at the original timing. So we could do this kind of throughout the program. And it's kind of like a restrained direction. So let's say I have an audio track here. We can hold down the Alt key to make a copy. So I just have to press and hold the Alt key before releasing, and that will make a copy of that event. If I hold down the Alt key and I move it up or down vertically first, and I try to move it over, and now while holding down my Alt or Option key, I hold down the Control key. So let's just come here. So I'm going to move it downward. And now, so my Alt, it's copied. But if I hold down Alt, so the direction you move it is what determines what gets restrained. So I move it down, hold down the Alt key, and tap Command or Control. Now I can't adjust the time of it. So I can only move it vertically. Now, if I moved it first, so let's say if I come here and I copy this event here and I move it in time first, so while holding down Alt to make a copy, now I can move it to other tracks, but if I hold down Control, I'm restrained, or I can't move it up or down. I could only move it in time. So whatever position that you move the event first, vertically or horizontally, so now and then hold down the Alt key, Alt or Option, and then hold down Command or Control after, and then let go. And then you can constrain the movement of that horizontally or vertically. And that works in the MIDI editors as well as the project window. Okay, good to see sub 403 from Calgary on a Hangout. Question, can we do automatically color selection when adding a track? So as you add a track, it's not, going to add the color here. So if we go to add an audio track, there's no color selection. But if one of the things that you can do, that a lot of people miss is just in one of the preferences. So if you just wanted to add colors to your track, if you go to track and mix console, you could have it automatically use the track's default color. You could also use the previous track color or use the previous track color +1, so that way as you add tracks, they're automatically colored. But you can't select a color from within the add track dialog box. So just going through question. All right. Okay, how do I export a stereo binaural wave from an ambisonics mix, not a 4-channel wave? In console, I have phones with the ambidecoder to monitor the ambisonics first order output on the master out. I think you may need to, and I haven't done much work with ambisonics, but I think this is where, maybe on the master fader in the mixer, that you might have to just run the ambient decoder here. And it's probably going to be helpful if you do it post fader. So I think, I don't have the track configuration, but I think you may need to just simply run it run the ambient decoder when you have an ambisonics bus directly into master in the stereo master bus. Question, is it possible to assign a shortcut key to toggle between the Q mix and main mix? I believe you could do it. Let's take a look. Thanks for all the wonderful questions. If you've, again, learned something new, make sure you, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, do that. And also make sure that you have done a like on the video. So let's say... All right, so let's see if we could... So it looks like down mix presets. So we could do different monitors. So it doesn't look like we could switch the monitoring between the two. I thought that we would be able to. Let me just take a look at the control room and see if there's... I'll just see if we do the Q mix on and off. And it doesn't look like that does it. So I don't see a way of doing it. Let me look just in case. Sometimes it may sneak into... let's see if it's possible in... maybe in the control room here, in the... Here, I'll just learn this and see if this does it. Okay, I'll give this a shot. Now, I don't see a way of doing that, but I could do some more research on that if you want to send me an email to clubcubase@steinberg.de. But I would think that there would be a way to do that, but I'm surprised that there isn't. Hello, Greg. Thanks for your energy and time. Question: when I create a new tracks, audio or instrument, there seems to be a default EQ setting. How can I reset the Cubase system? I think that it's going to be. You may have saved. Let's take a look. So add an audio track. Okay, so we're here. So mine are always kind of set this way, but I think maybe if we. I think my son's knocking on the door. Bear with me just 1 second. All right, I'm back. Sorry about the delay. So let's take a look at the default EQ. So I think if we come over here, let's say if I save a preset, and if it's named default, we could say save as default preset. So now every time that I add a track, I think we'll have those as your default preset. So what you want to do is to just come over here and excuse me, we could reset the EQ. So let's just say I wanted this to be completely off. And then just in the upper right hand corner, choose save as default EQ. And then every time you boot up, it'll be those particular frequencies. So you probably maybe accidentally saved a default EQ, and every time you add a track, it would automatically have those default EQ settings. So if you just reset that, you should be all good to go. Okay, hi Greg, question, can I rename different events in the same track? So let's say if I wanted to come here, we could go to, you'll see description. So we could select the event, and then you'll see description. And that way you could rename them. If you don't see the description field, what you want to do is to click on the settings cogwheel and make sure that description is checked. So once again, just come right over here to the settings cogwheel. On the info line, make sure you have description checked. Then you can select an event and type in whatever name you want. So we see question, how mixer track name font size change. So I think that the fonts are going to be kind of the same size. So let's take a look if we zoom in or out. If we have these, I think the fonts will stay the same. And it could be, let me just see, sometimes there might be a preference. I don't think there's a preference for that, but we'll take a look. Yes, I don't see settings for fonts or font size on the mix console. Okay, Greg, researching VST networking loading solution. I reviewed the VST system link, but it requires interfaces. I request feature request for network solution sans interfaces, i.e. Vienna Symphony Ensemble. So, it's obviously people have wanted, VST system link or something like that to work over Ethernet. I've passed that on as a suggestion already, but I'll kind of reiterate it. But, currently the VST system link is, does work really well and allows you to, send all of the audio over and have, sample accurate clocking and sample accurate synchronization as well. Okay, Ambient Dave has probably been on a Hangout for a while, but he's just checking in on the timeline where I'm at. So great to have you on a Hangout, Dave. He's always working long hours. I hope the weather's a little cooler this week for you. Okay. Sorry for the interruptions earlier. I think my son is settled down now, watching a Disney show. Okay, just reading through comments. So Echotronic, and this is probably a further question about recording the audio from like Pad Shop and changing the sounds. Sorry if this sounds stupid. Is it possible to plug your output of your audio interface into an input so you can record the sounds from your VST? Yeah, but again, I don't think you need to do that if you just adjust, if you just route the audio out to a group and the group output to an input, and then any of the knobs that you move and changes, you can automate that as well as record the audio output in real time. So I know we probably did this after you asked with the delay and the timeline to when we get to the question. Okay. Okay, reading through comments. Okay, I think my chat field just jumped, so let me see if I can get back. Okay, so I probably lost some of the questions, the time in our, so I apologize. So if we missed out on some questions. Okay. Greg, in score settings, using the staff tab, the text settings are black against a black background, making all invisible. When I type in a box, the text is apparent. Otherwise, all black. Okay, good to see you, Clay, on a Hangout. Clay is an incredibly talented musician, producer, engineer, all-around great guy. So let's take a quick look. Okay, so let me just okay, so let's see when he's typing in. Let's make sure I'm getting this right. So all the text settings are black against a black background, making all invisible. I see that, so I will go ahead and I'll mention that to developers. So I can see, like, as soon as you kind of double click in the field or click here, you could kind of see the values. But thanks for bringing that to my attention. I'll pass that on, make sure, see if they could get that resolved. I know sometimes there's some things in, that could cause that, but I'll mention that. Thanks for laying it. All right. So just see a question. Which film is it, Greg? Maybe my son's watching. He's been kind of hooked on Stuck in the Middle, a little Disney series. He's probably watched it 20 times, every episode. Okay. Okay. From Recording Mag. Is there any way to toggle all the tracks in a session simultaneously between linear or musical versus one at a time so you do not shift or stretch if I add or alter tempo after music has begun? So I think we could do this through the project logical editor. So I'll just do a new project. Okay, so let's say these are all set to musical mode. And I think there's a Project Logical Editor preset for this. So we'll go to the project menu to Project Logical Editor, and I think so toggle domain on selected tracks. So we can say container type is equal to track, property set to event is selected, track operation time domain toggle. So now I could just click here. They've all changed to musical mode, or linear mode rather. So as we go up and down, we could see that we do that. And if we want to change these all back to musical mode, again, select, hold down the shift key, and run this. And then you could just go back and forth between musical and linear mode without having to do it track by track. We thought that'd be a bummer too. So hopefully that's a new trick for you. Okay, so I think we still have some discussion on like with automation and how to write for, we'll just do this one more time. So let's add an instrument track of Pad Shop. Okay, and how to record this as audio. So I will just come over here. Let me just load up a quick preset of some kind. I will just grab a knob and I will right click and just learn a CC from this knob. And let's just do maybe duration. I'll learn CC. So if I wanted to, write, so I'm controlling this, just the parameters by a CC, and I will add a group track to the selected track. So, and then I'll add a stereo audio track. And its input will come from group 1. So now as I play this particular note, the audio, I could adjust the parameter here. So we'll just start off. And I'll just record, and you could automate the parameters in the plugin as well. So I'll just come right over here. So moving the parameter, and we'll listen to just the audio. So I'm going to mute the MIDI part, and we'll hear those changes occur. So all the changes have been captured in audio, and let's look at the MIDI, and we'll just have the MIDI should carry over and do the changes on the parameter as well. Those just automate it. So, it seems to me like it's capturing the audio, just, it's basically just bussing the audio out and being able to capture it. So, okay. Okay, reading through comments. So question, can we create samples for Korg PA600? Let me just look up what a Korg PA600 is. So I see that it's an arranger keyboard. So probably the samples, a lot of those arranger keyboards are kind of very fixed, closed ecosystems. If it can, take an audio file and play back samples, which I know a lot of the arranger keyboards don't. You could do that, but my gut feeling would be probably it's not going to take samples in. The PA600 may not take samples in, so I would probably say no, but it's not a limitation of Cubase. It's probably just a limitation of the architecture, the design of the Korg, and lots of keyboard companies work that way. But I could be mistaken. I'm not super familiar with it. I see a comment that my son wants a free copy of Backbone. He has access to it, so he should be happy. All right. Okay, just... Okay, just reading through comments. Thanks for everyone being on Hangout. And just seeing someone else, hey, Greg and everyone had a meeting, just got here. Hope everyone is well. Has anyone got Spectral Layer 7 yet? It is amazing. Yet I think that the unmixed stems blew me away. I just, try to make it not work on something. It was pretty frightening, being able to separate tracks. Okay. Reading through comments, lots of great discussion. So I see, hi, is there any chance that Cubase on Android will someday get external plugins? I'm sure probably, I haven't done a lot of, I'm kind of an Android guy for my phone and stuff, but I haven't gotten, I probably need to get a newer phone to run the Cubase. So I'm not that familiar with like the plugin architecture on Android, but I'm sure, I think it's probably a little more mature on iOS, but I'm sure that, if there's a way to do it, that it'll naturally kind of evolve to go there. Okay, so how to transfer drum MIDI file to wave with each drum having its own track, i.e. kick, snare, etc. So let's just jump back, close this file. So a lot of times when we need to separate stuff out, we could think of it as being more working based on outputs. So, and we could do, very simple stuff like, for render in place. So I'll just revert this project. Okay, so let's say if I have just a quick drum part here. Okay, so I have this, and let's say we'll open this up, and let's say I wanted to add more room mic into like my snare. And more overhead. Okay, so let's say I have, I go to my mixer, here. And within Groove Agent, we have, 32 stereo outs. So I'll play, and let's say I want my kick to go out of output 2, my snare out of output 3, or let's just say we'll send this to the master. And output 2, and let's say my hi-hat to output 3, my overheads to output 4, and to output 5. So this way we could have, kicks, snares, hi-hats. So, and what we could do now is we're going to add, just like we've done before, let's add a number of group channels. So we'll say 5 group channels. So as we'll just come here. I won't do that. Let me just add a group. And what I want to do now is to take, this particular track, and we could do it just kind of in our main mixer. So we'll say, go to my routing, and I can say, let's send this to group 1, to group 2, group 3, 4. And if you do this a lot, you could have this kind of set up as a preset. So now I want to add, let's say 5 audio tracks. So I'll just do it from here. Okay, so I'll add 5 audio tracks. And for these audio tracks, I want it to be coming from group 1 to group 2, group 3, 4, and 5. So I could place all these, so even if I could record directly to these tracks. So if I just wanted to, record enable all of the selected tracks here, I could just hit play and record. And then they're all kind of split up just like that. So if we go to audition one of the sounds, there's my kick, snare, hi-hat, overheads, and room. Now once I've done that splitting up and sending them, I think I could also just come here and let's go to edit to render in place. And I'll just go to my render settings and I'll just say, let's do the complete signal path. And I could choose to mute the source if I wanted to, or leave them the same and just choose to render. And now it's going to render all of the files independently here. See if my Mac is going to hang up or not. I'll give it a second and see if it. Yeah, I did define a range here. So, but you could also just do a render in place. Let me just see if I can exit out of Cubase here real quick. It may just be writing a really long file. But so the render in place will work as well. And just... I'm going to go ahead and just reboot my Mac. And I'll pause to Hangout. So if you guys just wait with me, I'll be right back. So just give me like 2 or 3 minutes. I'll go ahead and reboot. All right, I'm just going to do a quick test, make sure the audio is back. Bear with me just a second. All right, so let's move on. Sorry about the interruption there. Okay. Okay, so question. Sometimes when I route a MIDI track to an instrument track, disable the instrument track and enable it again, the MIDI track is no longer routed to the instrument. Do you know why that may be? So let's go ahead and give it a shot. So I'll add an instrument. Okay, and let me just add an instrument track here as well. So this will be a MIDI track. So I'll try both. Okay, so I will choose to disable. Let's choose to enable, disable both of these tracks. So it looks like they're both still kind of routed, but if you have a particular project, you could email to me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. So question, sorry to seem ignorant, but where in the USA are you based, Greg? I'm based out of Washington, D.C. area, so I'm in the East Coast. I'm in Alexandria, Virginia, so I'm just about 12 miles south, right off the Potomac River in it's a Washington, D.C. area. So question, my media bay keeps playing the preview, and even after I stop it, I always have to close it to, all right, just gonna check a quick message here. Okay, I'm just gonna quickly check Hangout. Got a message from Terry. Let me just check my feed. Thank you, Terry, for emailing. Okay, just bear with me a second. I'm just going to check my OBS settings. let me just see if I could get the video to display back. So hang on. All right, let me see if I just switch. All right, I'm just trying to work with some settings in OBS. Let me see if I could get this sorted out. Let's see if we get mirroring going. All right, still trying to get this figured out. We may have to end a little early today. Let me just see if I could. All right, well, it looks like my OBS is not going to cooperate and show my other screen. It's like it's running in dual screen. Let me see if I could quit OBS. Okay, so it looks like my OBS is not going to cooperate and it's not sharing my normal screen. So I think we may end the Hangout a little early today. I apologize for that. We'll try to have, I'll just kind of keep monitoring, see if it switches. Oh, okay, I think we're back. Okay, so I'm going to do a quick audio test and make sure we're okay. Bear with me just a second. Just make sure that the audio is okay. All right, so let's move on. Sorry about the kind of things acting weird today. Okay, I may have lost some questions. Let me see if in my other one here. So okay, just going through the timeline and a different chat field. Okay, so all right, so I may have lost some questions. Let me just see if we could continue on. Apologize for all the hiccups today. Okay, so question, Greg, could you please do another quick run through of sidechaining and when to use it? Thank you. So let's go ahead, and a lot of times people use sidechaining for different creative tasks. You may actually just kind of get started with, a lot of times people use it for like kick and like bass. So let's say if we have a particular sidechainable element, kind of like this, and now let's just reset my audio interface. Sorry about this. So if we wanted to kind of drive the dynamics of like a bass part using like a kick drum. So if I want the bass sound to be compressed from the kick drum, what I would do is come to that particular track. We could go to our channel here, and I'm going to have a compressor. Sidechain could be activated on a compressor here. And if you click just to the right of that, you could add a different sidechain input. So I'll just choose this kick. And so we'll do that. And now when we listen to it, we can see that the kick drum will trigger the compressor that's on the particular track. So we'll come over here and just watch the compressor. We have this compressed pretty heavily. So this is a pretty popular technique in like dance music. So it's kind of a pretty extreme example. So that's a quick way of doing side chaining. Some people will side chain vocals to other things, or different, rhythmic patterns as well for side chaining. So just a quick overview. So Greg, are you going to do an Xbox controller demo in the future? Wasn't planning on it. I don't have an Xbox controller. But I think Jazz Dude has mentioned that there's a couple utility programs that could convert that into MIDI information. So, but I don't have an Xbox controller, unfortunately. I'm not a big gamer. Okay, so we have a question. What's the difference between Hallion and SE? So the big version of Hallion is, we could think of Hallion Sonic SE as just being kind of like a sample and instrument playback engine. So when we open it up here, we could see that we'll just be able to have our different libraries that could be created, and we're going to have 16 sound slots. We'll have full mixing capabilities. When we get to start working with Hallion is kind of like the engine that a lot of instruments are derived from. So Hallion not only allows you to actually sample directly into the unit to make your own instruments, but you could design and build your own VST instruments directly within the actual instrument itself. So, if I have a sample inside of here, I could just drag it into Hallion. So I could just take any of my let's just zoom in here just a little bit. I'll take just this particular sample, drop it in, and now it's, and at this point you could build your own instruments as well. So you could have, you know, full sample editing capability. So you say, okay, I want it to come directly here. So you could have not only a wealth of different libraries available, but once you start getting into editing, you could say, you know, let's go into the sample edits. Let's look at the mapping, you know, and if you wanted to add synthesis in here, you could add different layers. So, for instance, we'll just look at some of the sound. So you could combine different forms of synthesis with, you know, directly in conjunction with your samples. So if you wanted to have like, you know, wavetable synthesis, you could come over here. Let's look at the edit and be able to kind of say, you know, we want to see the macro. So as you'd play back a voice, you could actually see like, you know, wavetable synthesis. You have virtual analog. You're going to have and you're able to kind of combine all these different elements. So if you wanted to, you know, you could have kind of a macro page, but if you want to see kind of what instruments are doing kind of behind the scenes, at this point you could see kind of your wavetable oscillator, and you're able to build different, you know, with a full modulation matrix. So all these different components. So if you're really interested in designing and building your own content and sounds and instruments, Halion is a great solution for that. If you want to just play back, you know, a wide variety of sounds, the playback engine, that's basically the Halion Sonic SE. Okay, just reading through comments. Okay, what is the easiest way to transpose all the arrangement with chord tracks, chord pads, full song, real time? So, you know, if you wanted to, you know, the chord, you know, if you have MIDI stuff, the chord, you could do chord pads and chord tracks for dealing with monophonic audio. But if you have polyphonic audio, it's not really designed for that. But I'll kind of show you some of the stuff we could do. Like I'll just take a quick, so we'll take a Bach piece here. And here I have like, you know, the chord track set up, and we'll just kind of make it a little bigger here so we can see. So listen to it. So we'll take our Brandenburg concertos. Now, if I want to just take these and transpose them, so let's see what this sounds like. So I could just transpose. And if I wanted to make these from, you know, major to minor, I could just, and it's transposed this up. Send this to the relative minor. So that gives you ideas of what you could do with, you know, with chord tracks to transpose stuff, you know. So that's a great solution if you're doing vocals and bass, but it's not going to take a, like a piano part that has chords and be able to fit all the audio of chords to do that. So, hey, Greg, is there a way to export single tracks or groups with their complete signal path? I hate making stems because it exports effects separately. So let me just jump back to, I'll jump to another project here. So one way of doing it is, you could do kind of a two-step approach. So if you wanted to render your groups, you could do that. But let's say if I'm here and let's say if I've added, I'll add just an effect send to the selected channels. So I will add just a phone call, come in, just add a reverb. And we'll just add this way too big. So if you choose to just, do a render in place. So now if I just wanted to, and if we come here, so, record, do an export audio mixdown for the groups. So if I had this all going to a group and then render the group as an audio file in the same project. And just when you go to render in place for particular files, so we go to edit to render in place, you could say, let's render settings. And at this point, you could have the complete signal path. So I'll just do one file here, this selected file. And since we have a stereo effect on it, we'll just choose to render that. And it will just take, each of the files as stems and be able to render with, your effects, your EQs, automation, and all that. So, consider using render in place instead of batch export. And as we do this, we'll have our kick drum, and you could do this for multiply selected tracks simultaneously. But now when I come here, I could just render out, and here's my kick drum with all of its effects. And we'll just make this a little louder so you can hear it. So we'll add too much reverb for this. So any of the changes you make, so, render the groups and then just select all the files and do a render in place. And that way all the effects will be included within the audio file. Okay, question. Try to shorten note lengths as a group selected in a simple linear 16th note sequence, but it wouldn't do it. Have to shorten notes individually. What am I doing wrong? So let's take a look. See if we could recreate this. Okay, so let me just do a quick, okay, so say I'm trying to shorten note lengths in a group is selected MIDI node linear to 16th note sequence, but it wouldn't do it. So let's just make this a little larger. So let's, okay, so say I just will take these and so it looks like that's, selecting all of the notes and just changing their length. You could probably also just do a quantize the lengths of, so let's say if we go to, so say we'll do the quantize MIDI event lengths, let's say to 16th notes. So I'll select these. So set my quantize value to 16th notes, go to edit, advanced quantize, quantize event lengths. So if I have all these notes, again, just go to advanced quantize to quantize note lengths. So you could try that and see, you know, I would see if that makes sense for you. But if we do this, we could just also, once they're all kind of the selected notes, just change them accordingly. Okay, so I think we got Echotronics rendering real-time recording to of the pad shop. So I think that'll do trick. Okay, so is there a strum feature in the piano roll? So what a lot of people do for strumming effects is, you know, use just a, you know, like an arpeggiator, but you could also use kind of the, it's a trim tool. So if you hold down, like, you know, some people do strumming kind of like this type of deal. So if you want to arpeggiate some different chords, or you could go backwards, you know, hold down like the Alt or Option key to simulate strumming. So you could do a lot of stuff like that, but there's no dedicated strum function per se. So Greg, could you please talk about the state of NRPN parameter recording, automation control of external devices, synths, hardware mixers? You know, so one of the things that a lot of people miss when you're doing a lot of control of external parameters is coming to make sure that you go to the preferences. And a lot of those can be dealing with sysx data. So if you go to MIDI filter, at this point you could just make sure that you have sysx not being filtered. So make sure you do that. And then kind of, I don't have a device here that's connected to my work computer that's that will spit out any sysx, but it'll just kind of show up directly in your list editor. And then you're able to kind of do all of your list editing. You'd see all the NRPNs listed there for you. Okay, so question, how do you sidechain in Cubase Elements? So I don't think that the Elements version has sidechaining support like the Cubase Pro. So you may consider upgrading, but there may be some third-party solutions that kind of work with that. I see a comment from Jazz Dude says, I've done multi-channel recordings 19 years ago. Most people can't deal with 5.1. I doubt there will be Atmos out there done perfectly. Only a very few studios will have 12-channel audio plus speakers and subwoofers. That's a good point. I've been kind of doing the multi-channel stuff for a long time, and you know, I've yet to walk into anyone's house whose 5.1 setup was right. Okay. So I just see a question. Can you go over how to run Rewire in Cubase with Ableton? So I think once you have Ableton kind of or Rewire installed, that you'll just see, I think it'll just kind of show up, you know, once the Rewire is active, that it'll show up in here, or you'll see the Rewire. And go to your Rewire setup, and you could select your different elements there, and then the two should be synchronized together. I don't have a copy of Ableton, so. Okay, just reading through comments. Okay, so it says in Cubase 10.5, I want to set my reference track to no target and use the Q send. Every time I set the track to no target, it sets itself back to stereo out. How can I fix that? So I'll just do a quick project here where we could do this, and then we'll move on to some questions that were sent in. It's a project from Clay Oswald, who's on the Hangout. Okay, so we have kind of a mix down file, like a reference track here. So this is a reference track, and what I'm going to do is on this particular track, I just set it to no bus, and now if I solo this track, we're not going to hear it because it's not routed anywhere. If I set this track to output to the stereo, we could, hear that particular track. But what I want to do is to route this track directly to my QMix. So I could have everything going on. And I'll just put like a really horrible EQ. And say that's my mix, and I wanted to use the reference track. So I would just go to QMix 4. So once we have, this particular track being sent out, but you see that as we do this, it's not being sent to any particular, bus. So it's not jumping back. So maybe I'll just make sure. So instead of no target, because sometimes you could set up the tracks here to targets, try just setting it to no bus and see if that makes a difference. Okay, so just see a question. What is the best loudness level, in your opinion, in LUFS for a song? I think, for music stuff, a lot of people are aiming for -14. See people asking for a reference button in Cubase. Hopefully 11 will do it. Hint, hint. And you can see some really cool stuff with Wavelab and how that handles reference tracks as well. Okay, just reading through a couple quick comments. Okay, so we had some questions that were sent in. Let's see if we can get to some of those. Okay, so we had someone who had a question about using how to save their Hallian content. So let's take a quick look at that, like if they made a sample in Hallian. So I'll just do a new project here. And we'll drop a loop in. Okay, and I'll add an instrument track of Hallian. Okay, let's just drop that loop in here. Okay, we will. Okay, so what I want to do now is to export this. So I'll go to my program tree. Okay, so I'll just put this into my desktop. We'll call it 0804. And we could give it, I may have to, just probably a copyright, a protected file for, just give me 1 second. Okay. So let's export this and basically how to get it to show up again. Okay. And now if we want to come over here, so I think the question was where to access it, but I think if we just maybe have to just come over here and then you're kind of able to get it loaded back up there. But I'll see if there's a way to have it show up kind of in the browser. So let's say if I just go to, I will cut this program. And let's go to desktop. And then, so you may just have to go to the browser instead of the media bay and just navigate from there to load up the samples. Okay, so question, what can I do about the fact that every time Windows has an upgrade, Cubase and eLicenser won't work? Until now, I've solved the problem with a reinstall of a previous version of Windows. Is there a better solution? From Dirk. So I think the best solution is not to, necessarily go back to a previous version of Windows. I've had this happen to me only once in all the Windows updates, but what you want to do is to actually just make sure that, just update the eLicenser if necessary. So just reinstall the eLicenser, and that will probably fix 99.9% of the issues with a Windows update. So, and that way that's a lot less invasive than going through, rolling back your version of Windows. Okay, so another question mailed in. First of all, thank you for the informative tutorials you provide us with. I would like to know if there's a way to have the functionality of quick controls, but for more than 8 parameters. I have a U control UC33E, and I've assigned 8 of the faders to quick controls and track, which are assigned to the parameters of some effects, but I need more. I tried to set up the generic remote control, but it's complicated and time consuming. Do you have a better and quicker solution? So I think that once you kind of understand what the generic remote's doing, spend a little time and think of the generic remote as being kind of more global based and using, more of like kind of, I want to access these 8 kind of, 8, collections of 8 parameters for quick controls. So if you want to utilize more of that, again, just come over here, click on the MIDI learn, move the knob, and that will capture the message. So I would get those set up, and then you could change these. But, depending on if you go to a mix console, the parameter may be specific for, not EQ1, but EQ1 on that channel. So think of this as like more global. These will be kind of consistent through different projects. If you also want to go to the quick control, something that a lot of people miss is that you could save quick control presets. So if you say, I just want to see all my send levels, I wanted to see this. And, if we start off with, I wanted to remove all the quick control assignments, you could click in the quick controls, select the different functions. Okay, so I wanted the low cut on. I want high cut on. I wanted to go to send level 1. And then once you have this all done, just click here and you could save that different preset. So you could have multiple presets to kind of switch between quick controls as well. All right. And then we had a question about like transients, if there was a way to do this in the sample editor for moving different components based on like triplets or dotted rhythmic values. So I'm afraid it doesn't really snap that way in the sample editor. So just to kind of show, you know, one of the things that a lot of people miss on the main project window is, let's say I will create warp markers from the hit points here. So a lot of people miss that, like if we have our quantized value here set to, let's say, quarter note triplets, that sometimes you may not see, and we have our grid set to use quantize. As we move events, that this will snap to triplets, even if we don't see triplets as the main grid. But it doesn't carry over necessarily when we start doing more working with warp tabs in the sample editor. So I will mention that again, but if you're doing this in the sample editor, and we're looking at particular, let's say if we just double click here, we could now we'll create our warp markers and we'll go to our audio warp. And as we change these will still kind of snap to more to 16th notes as we start to, do our free warping. We could see them kind of pause a little bit at different snap areas, but it won't necessarily snap based on triplets, but I'll mention that again. All right, so let's go back to our live feed. Thanks for everyone's patience. Sorry we had some technical glitches today. It's a bunch of computers to get to work very soundly all together to make the Hangouts happen. Okay, let's just check some other. Can the combined stereo panner in making two different takes sound thicker? Example, guitar takes for left and two for right, then each side not being hard panned, left, hard, right. So if you have two different guitar tracks and it's going out to a stereo panner, let's look at this. And a lot of people may not be hip to, the default panner that you have in Cubase is going to be, a balance. But if it's being routed to a stereo track, you could also have a stereo balanced panner or a combined panner. So I'll click here and we'll say combined panner. And then we could, go to this particular track. And, you could have one guitar kind of more focused on the left or right, and sometimes, for mono compatibility, sometimes people will shy away from panning so hard, but, maybe have it a little more focused left and the other guitar focused a little more to the right, but still have a little space on the edges. And that could sometimes help with phase issues that could be, incorporated in mixes when people are doing such hard panning. All right, so we have Gareth's daughter checking in, and he needs to feed her. So, hello to Gareth's daughter. Thanks for letting us borrow your dad. So, all right. So question, do you have a resource about importing and exporting orchestral music between Cubase and Dorco? So currently it's basically kind of set up as Music XML is probably the best way to do it. I know that now that a lot of the Dorco features have been realized, especially with, version 3.5, that there's now more discussion on practical integration between Cubase and Dorco. So I think, we'll be seeing that coming in the future. So it says there has to be an easier way than copy and pasting MIDI data between them. Definitely try exporting a music XML from Cubase and putting it in. So. Okay, so question, how do we quickly change back and forth from mono to stereo for mixing purposes? So if you're doing it for mixing, So let's say let me just revert this. And we have just a couple more minutes. So let's say I have my mix and I wanted to go between mono and stereo for mixing. We could go to the control room and you'll see down mix presets, and I could just listen to it in mono, stereo, and I can make my mix decisions just that easily. Okay, moving on. Okay, hi Greg, how can I change chords, progressions, arrangement in different Gregorian modes or different scales like pentatonic, harmonic minor, or blues? So if we have a chord track, and I will come right over here, let's add a chord track. And as we start to enter chords in, so let's say we put in a D chord, you also will see where you could have just a scale, and you could uncheck automatic scales. So when I come here, we could just say, okay, I wanted this to be an E, and you could say pentatonic or E blues scale, and you could choose different scales to work within. Okay. So I just see a comment. It'd be nice if constrained movement was a bit easier. It'd be nice to use just one modifier for it. So, I think a lot of the modifiers are used, and I think once you kind of get used to it, it's not so, it makes sense, and it'll become muscle memory. So I see, is there a list of the Cubase Club topics with the dates they were covered? So we're trying to get a list together. I'll follow up with my colleagues in Hamburg, but Ted Springman, who's on the Hangout today, I'm not sure if he's still on, but he has kind of a master list, but each Hangout is also indexed and pinned to the top of the first comment. Okay. Okay. And I see sub 403, just telling people if you haven't already, hit the like button. Okay, we'll see if we can get one more quick question in before we wrap up. And if we go over 4 hours, then we'll lose all of our automatic closed captioning, which is helpful for people who speak other languages. Okay. Okay, just seeing. So I see, will Steinberg ever implement smooth scrolling in Cubase? So a lot of it could, as Terry mentioned right below, it could be contingent upon video drivers, but, like I don't have any problems with scrolling. And let's say if I'm playing, let's see if we could go back near like sample resolution. We'll zoom in and out. So down to sample level. So it seems pretty smooth to me. So I don't really have any issues, but there's obviously a lot of variables with different graphics card drivers. Okay, so I know we're running out of time, so I want to thank everyone for the wonderful questions. And if you learned a tip or trick, please feel free to hit the like button. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, make sure you do that. We'll be doing another Hangout on Friday, starting at 1 p.m. Hopefully I won't have weird OBS issues, but I apologize for that. And thank you, Terry. Dean, I think, sent me an email just to let me know that you weren't seeing what I was showing. So I appreciate Terry doing that. And we'll see everyone on Friday. And if you have questions you want to submit in advance, send it to clubcubase@steinberg.de. Everyone have a wonderful day, and we'll see you on Friday. Goodbye.